I'm going to do a brief introduction, and then I'm going to show the multimedia presentation. And after that, Isabel, who's going to be the designer of this book, is going to be in conversation with me. We're going to talk a little bit about the vision of the book. And then if you all have anything to say toward the end, or you can ask it then, or share feedback. You can also write it in the chat too, and I'll get back to it. So. Oops. All right. One second. When I conceived of this project, I had a very simple idea. This idea has since unraveled into a multi-phase operation, but at the very core of it, it still remains. So I don't want to over-explain or guide you through it too much, but I do want to give you context in which this project was conceived and initiated, so I can have it on the record, because this idea extends beyond it being an archive or photo documentary project. It's very much my own artistic expression. I, a photo-based artist, am documenting other artists who happen to be my friends or friends of friends who I happen to share space with. I want to capture a moment in their ideation phases, in their creative process, in this part of their life, in their lives, their questions, their struggles, their hopes, who they are as people. Some of you know I love working with constraints. And film photography is nothing less than that, with the limited amount of exposures per film roll, the risk of not immediately knowing if the film roll you shot was good or not, the film's sensitivity to environmental conditions. But I also believe film photography allows for so much creative potential because of these constraints and the process it requires. Film photography captures the quality of a moment and the texture through capturing light, making a moment a material. The photos you're about to see are scanned by a photo lab, specifically ProImage photo on the Upper West Side. But with the forthcoming book project, which Isabel and I will discuss after this presentation, I plan to rescan the film negatives myself, which is a process of creative control, getting to manipulate the different values of color, light, tone, and texture, and so on. Over the past 3 months, I've endured the anxieties of what film photography entails, the amount of money I spent on film rolls and lab fees, the times I thought I lost my cameras, my film rolls, my digital files sent by the photo labs. This proves how fragile this project is, and perhaps how fragile photos are generally. How we have several containers that store this content that would otherwise be fleeting. Ultimately, I understand a portrait to mark a moment in our lives, us at an age, a phase, a stage in our careers, emotional lives, physical states. We will never get these moments back. And if we as artists are leaving behind our artworks to record our expression of a moment, what about leaving behind a record of what we as people are undergoing? In this series, I conduct studio visits with artists to have conversations about their process, artist to artist, their relationship to the workspace, projects they're working on, their origin stories, and where they hope to see their art making moving forward. Within these photographs, I took portraits of artists and their workspaces. During these visits, I tried my best not to be an intruder and to make the camera's presence as comfortable as possible. For some, I achieved this. For others, I had to be a bit more strategic, which is understandable, seeing that the history and the present use of the camera has proven to be far more exploitative than not. It might be ingrained in us to be skeptical of the machine itself and the person operating it. I'm very aware of this, which is why I try to be intentional about who I point it at and at what times. As you experience this presentation of work, I ask that you not only listen to the words, but pay attention to the ambiance of each recording. Listen and watch for themes and repetitions across artists. Seek the relationship between the subject and the surrounding. Think about the audio in relation to the image, because for some of the studio visits, the photo and the audio was happening simultaneously. And for others, it came after a session of sharing ideas, thoughts, and artwork. If I had it my way, I would insist that people take at least one portrait a day. And when I say portrait, I mean it as a composed shot with the subject in front of the camera, depicting a portrayal of that subject. Portraits are not for vanity. They're for record keeping. They're for material evidence to leave behind. That we are here, that we were here. Portraits are recurring reminders of our humanness, that we are growing each day, and each of those days won't be the same. In fact, if this pandemic taught us anything, it's that todays are fleeting and the tomorrows are uncertain. I would also insist that people print out these portraits and store them in an album, give them to their family, friends, store them in archives, because you'll never know when you need to revisit this moment. I guess you can say I'm creating future nostalgia. I hope that with this presentation, I will remind you of the importance of a portrait photo, and you will think more intently about your own photo archive and what you will do with it. This is a portrait of me in my studio / bedroom. This is where I keep all my cameras. I have a framed print, and it's a self-portrait of me in the mirror.
Responsibility in a way, and you appreciate that you're an ally and you want to tell the stories, and you start wondering like how. So if putting it on Instagram was never going to be my plan, just by coincidence, and I think it was the smartest thing that I did, because now there's a conversation, there's a dialogue, there's a desire from other women to speak, and as the project progressed, the answers got a bit heavier and more intense, because I think girls saw other girls and saw what they said, and they said, I want to share my story as well. So to me, that has been really powerful. It's this like, there's this network, they don't know one another, but they know their stories. So we've been just able to do it. And I care for this text more than the photo. I like the girls to choose the photos, but I mean, some of those answers when they talk about intergenerational mental problems and trauma, it's just it's so intense to think about it. And what I like so far is some of those girls you would never in a million years think they're from Yemen,
right.
And they have, what makes you Yemeni, what makes you Arab. It's like I really just enjoy seeing their answers, and there's so much poetry and struggle and pain, but also beauty, and so I'm really enjoying it, and I don't know how far it will go. But I'll probably continue it for years to come and see. I'd like to see how far it goes, and and I'm working on it and like launching another project next year, hopefully. But that would be a 1-year project. Just look at this idea of men bodega workers.
Nice.
I don't know how things will go, but I'm enjoying them. I see them growing. Like, I have there's 12 portraits so far, and they're really meaningful. But they've never been exhibited before. So although it's kind of known to the world. But it doesn't get on my nerve that work has not been exhibited or so, because I think I created it with a mission to tell those stories, and I feel like I'm utilizing social media to the best of my abilities.
I do like it to crop in. I guess that's where that millennial culture comes in. Like I like a cropped Instagram type of portrait.
Interesting.
Like a snapshot.
This is your aunt here?
Yeah, the one on the bottom. The one on top is a still from a musalsal. And within that musalsal, it was like there was a conversation about elitism. But to me, it read as like a conversation about like Arab proximity to whiteness. And I guess the like equating success to whiteness and those like things around that. That's my friend Byrell behind my sister. That's on the easel. He has a blonde wig on.
Wait.
My friend Byrell behind my sister.
Oh, that's your sister?
Yeah. It's amazing. Well, real quick on my sister, I painted that portrait, and it looks like a hybrid between me and her. It's like, it's amazing how she could look so feminine, but at the same time have such masculine features. It's like the nose and the crookedness of it.
Yeah.
But she's still so pretty.
Right. No, it's a stunning portrait.
But I'm also doing things with that, like she's gonna have evil eye earrings. Like we were just having that conversation the other day. And she's gonna have her name in Arabic as a necklace, and I'm putting like a New York City skyline. And then this other portrait that I'm painting, it's it's somebody wearing a keffiyeh and a Yankee fitted cap on top to blend the two things together.
Yeah.
I'm still deciding if I want to make the hat, the bandana, like that white pattern bandana that you see, or if I want to make it like a keffiyeh pattern. There is that conversation when it comes to art about ambiguity and like not telling the whole story, but like leaving it.
I've built a very specific relationship, I guess, much more intimate with the space, obviously, with the pandemic.
Yeah.
And so I also had to make do with what was available, which is like I wasn't going out a lot, and so I had to like rediscover and rethink my space in a way, and started taking a lot of photos indoors. But overall, this place, I would say this is also the first place that I've lived in for so long, and so over time was able to kind of work and really kind of make into my own cocoon, let's say. And so there's something about being in this space surrounded by all these records and books that I like, and sort of I don't know, like it's just I feel like there isn't really this clear-cut line between a lot of like my different art practices. I mean, I've been focusing on photography a lot, but also like DJ and used to do a lot of like sound art stuff and music. And so it's just, I think being in the space and like getting in the zone, even though it's like a little confining sometimes because I don't have a studio, but there's something about just being able to, I don't know, being in this environment that for me just puts me at ease and allows like my creative juices to flow. And if I'm feeling stumped somewhere, I can like pick up something else, right? Like I can focus a little bit on music or see if that inspires me something, or pick up a book and either read or look at some photo books and see if that kind of inspires something and triggers something. So yeah, does that answer your question?
It does. It does.
And I feel like doubt is one of the worst things for art, because there have been times where I would be, because of like negative reception or thinking too much, what other people think, that it made me hesitant to even make work. And then that's just like for me, hesitance to express myself just means kind of like a ceasing of existence in a way. It's like if I don't do anything, it's like I don't know how, it's like I'm not really alive if there isn't evidence or actions that are authentic to what I'm thinking and believing. Yeah, so I mean that was just like a rock performance, and now it's like this whole idea, because it was just supposed to be me carrying a rock in New York City for 48 days as solidarity with Palestinians and a literalization of the baggage that I carry as a Palestinian here, and just how, I don't know, I wanted to put my identity into an object too and bring it into spaces, and it helped me understand my positionality better by understanding, or it helped me understand my positionality better by analyzing an external object. It's harder when it's in you and it's too deep and harder to access because of that. And then to see how other people treat it versus me being treated a certain way because I'm Palestinian was like a deflection of my identity.
And so when I'm working on a painting like that has multiple layers, of world building, I want to say, so that other people who don't live in that who aren't from that environment can understand it and get a sense of what it feels like to live in that space. Then I'm probably working in silence. Then there's so when I'm starting with the image, I have a lot of things that are drawn in the sketchbook, and then I trace them on tracing paper, and then I transfer it to the canvas. So all of that is done in silence, and then all of the arranging of the different elements, the objects, plants, sometimes maps, all of that arranging happens in silence, because there's a lot of like me moving things and stepping back to look at it, and then moving it again, stepping back to look at it, moving it again, but before I decide, okay, I'm gonna draw this in here. And then when I finally do draw it in there, that takes hours. And so that's all in silence too. Then when I'm painting, the painting's actually the easiest part. It's like the research and the trace and the drawing, and then the tracing, and then the retracing and retracing that happens. All that is like the main amount of work. But research, I like to say that the research is 60% of the work. Yeah.
Is your approach for designing for the body like the same approach as designing for
the viewing it? I think that I always want there to be a relationship, whether it's, I guess I'm at the very least thinking about scale and the relationship of the body, like the material to the body in that way. But interestingly, I think I tend to be, when I design for the body, it's usually not as layered. And I'm usually thinking of the, if it's something that's more comfortable, so it's like, okay, like this is a comfort garment, this is I guess it's more practical and thinking more about the function a lot more. There are things, function, like when I design for the body, I think about function a lot more. I also think about craftsmanship and where I do things when I'm, assembling these types of fabric collages that I would never do for a garment, because it just, after one wear, it'll fall apart. And for me, if I'm going to be making garments and if I'm going to do something different than like what is already available out there, then at the very least it should last. Like that's kind of the, like everything I do has to do with like materials, living multiple lives in a lot of ways. So it's like, yeah, I don't know if that answers.
I think it's important to say, like, my grandmother who passed away, she was all about crocheting and embroidery. She did this pillow for me. So just like her work, it's so precious to me. Yeah, so I think that's another reason that I use a lot of fabrics in my work. It's like acknowledging that I come from these people who created, who have always been creating.
That's so cool. It's like you're sourcing materials from your past.
Yeah, it is kind of like that. Maybe to make myself feel better about choosing a very precarious career path. Or, you know, maybe it's not just about me. It's actually like, you know, if you want to get mystical, others may be trying to communicate through what you do. I think that could be like that. There could be something to that idea that we make these images and it's just about a bigger thing than us. So
I mean, it's so interesting to hear that, right? Like, being like connected to your like Egyptian ancestry.
yeah.
And it's not like, you know, when I think about my ancestors, like I can only think so far back, but to be able to think.
I mean, they left an amazing
Sure.
archive, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's one of the benefits, I guess, of being Egyptian.
Everything I do seems to be process driven. Like, I work a lot with cyanotypes. That was like a big phase of mine. And the project, you're not seeing them right now because they're stacked behind each other, but I spent like a lot of time in 2019 and even early 2020 working on canvases where I would layer images of skies that I photographed in different parts of the world, and then just like make that exposure and then make another exposure and then make another exposure. And the idea was to collapse time and space and not just geographical borders. Because if you think about it, and it all started from like a conversation that I was having with a friend in Berlin many, many years ago, where he said, hey, let's set up a call. And he goes, how about 3 p.m. Tomorrow? And I say 3 p.m. your time or mine. And then he goes, I forget that we're also separated by time. And that kind of sparked something. And it took me a couple of years to act on it. But I couldn't stop thinking about this, and for a while, in early 2019, I binged these readings on physics, but physics in layman terms by Carlo Rovelli, and he was talking about how time effectively does not exist regardless of the fact that we perceive it. And that's kind of like what got the cyanotype on canvas project started, because I was like, it's interesting, we've made up those time zones, we've made up time, we even perceive time linearly because our brains can't conceive of it any other way. And it kind of, it begins to make sense that we also need to separate space one way or another, even though it's not that simple, it's mostly politically motivated. And I figured what happens when, you know how like the traditional definition of a photograph is you're capturing one moment or whatever. And I'm like, no, why? What happens if you're capturing several moments across several time zones and you're collapsing them onto one image? How many borders and boundaries are you breaking then? And if it's on canvas and if it's cyanotypes, like it's technically a photograph, but is it really a photograph or is it a painting? Like, and that's what I mean when I say collapsing structures.
And that's why I often say that I make works within forms of collapse, because my histories have to do with certain collapses and at some point in my life I realized art is a space to do that. So I'm an artist, not because of being great at it, but it's a space for me to make work about things that I feel I must. Yeah. There are certain instances with materiality and form that have been great experiences for me to do, but art for me, the making itself, is an uneasy space.
That as soon as I saw that mosaic, I was like, that's my calling. That's what I know I'm called to do. And they heard the story and they were like, so when you went up there, what did he say? I said, he said, no women, no Americans. And they're like, he's our uncle. Don't worry, we're gonna walk you up there tomorrow. So about 5 gorgeous Italian men walked me up this hill into the studio, and they're like, Constanto, she spent the night with us. She's a good girl, good girl, good girl. She needs mosaico, Constanto. It's her dream, it's her passion. And he asked me that same question that you just asked me, and I told him, I said, there's something in my spirit that when I collect small things, there's something about small things that make me feel calm and centered in the world. And he was like, I think you might be a mosaicist. So he said, okay, here's the deal. I'm gonna let you into the school on a trial basis. You have to live with me because here in Spilimbergo, young girls don't go around without a chaperone. So you're gonna have to be like my daughter because I'm gonna have to be your protector while you're here in this school. We've never had girls in this school. And look, and all the men were looking at me. All of them were like, oh, and you know, I was nice, young, pretty girl, and they're all looking at me, and he's like, all of them? I have to keep all of them away from you while you're learning. So he's like, I don't want trouble. I don't want any trouble, so no, you know, hanky-panky between all of you. He's like, you're gonna live in my house, and you're gonna be like my daughter, and you're gonna do what I tell you to do. And the second thing is while you're learning mosaic, you're not gonna ask questions. You're an apprentice. You're here to just watch and observe. And so for a long time, I just made coffee, swept the studio, organized materials, fetched for all the guys. Get me this, get me that. But I just was like, okay, this is an opportunity, haifa. You have an opportunity. Do not blow it because there's no place else to learn this. There was no place in America at the time to learn it. And I knew that I had to make this work. So I was there for 3 years and I learned classical mosaic.
So, yeah, that's the presentation. I hope you all heard that okay and looked okay. I think it did. So I guess before I dive in, just want to like give you some background, some like technical aspects of the project. So I shot with 2 different cameras with 2 different film stocks. And I used, for the color, I used Portra 400, Kodak Portra 400. And I shot with this camera. This is, it's a film camera, but it's not analog. It is a Minolta Maxim 7XI. In this, the range of the lens was really good because I could get like a really nice shot of a room. And then for the black and white portrait photos, I used this Mamiya ZE, and I used a 50mm lens. And for most of the portraits, I used Ilford HP black and white 400 ISO. And like I said, it took place over 3 months, and I shot 11 artists. Today I showed you 10. The sessions were about 1 to 2 hours long. I kept the interviews anywhere between 20 minutes to an hour. Some went over an hour. And the artists, as you saw, ranged from painters, oil and acrylic. We had conceptual artists, sculpture artists, photographers, and textile artists. So a nice range. And that wasn't intentional. It was kind of just happened that way. These are artists that I knew from my network. And I also asked artists to refer me to other artists. And the book project will encompass 15 artists. And like I said, it'll be in a book. And that book will be designed by Isobel Chiang, Chiang. Okay, great. And who I'm bringing up to this virtual Zoom stage right now. Isobel is a graphic designer and illustrator living in Brooklyn. She worked closely at Center for Book Arts to design exhibition catalogs, event brochures, and course calendars. And I worked really close with her. That's how I came to know Isobel. We worked at Center for Book Arts together. And she also designed for a number of institutions. Right now, she's currently designing for Small Editions, which is an artist book studio in Brooklyn. Hey, Isobel.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Of course, yeah. Thanks for being here. I'm curious, what's your impression of the series? I sent you the video last night, and you're seeing it again today. So,
yeah. I love the rawness of the images. In particular, there was one series where there was a light in the person's studio, and it was just like shining so brightly, and it kind of created this like whited out halo, and I just loved how that wasn't edited out. It was, studio lighting is such an important part of being in a studio, and you're constrained by your studio, and you're sometimes constrained by your lighting, hence this super bright light in the middle of the room. I liked how you didn't edit that out. That was just a very weird observation I had.
Yeah, film has this way of capturing light that digital doesn't do at all. And that's a really important element to these photos, because I want each photo to kind of not only depict the subject, but to tell a story around it, and to create, and to almost be an artwork within itself. So I love the halo effect. It's reminiscent of Renaissance artworks, like the way Jesus has a halo around him. Why not make ourselves kind of these oral figures with an aura, and
yeah,
that's kind of what I loved about that photo that you're talking about.
Yeah, you did a great job at presenting these artists in situ. You did a great job at that.
Yeah, so I kind of showed you over the past few months bits and pieces of the portraits, but seeing everything as a whole, I think I maybe included 50 to 70% of the shots that I took in the studios. Are you thinking about the project differently than what you were originally thinking?
Well, right at the beginning of the video, I noticed that the first person was talking about Instagram and how they pivot their practice away from that. And then immediately the second person was like, well, I'm really inspired by social media, and I actually absorb certain aspects of it into my practice. And seeing or hearing your interviews and seeing them juxtaposed beside each other, like really reiterated for me this idea that your conversations with each individual artist are actually like part of a broader conversation. And these people are talking within, through, between, beside each other. And so what we have been talking about with the book is how to make each conversation in conversation with all of them, and formally and structurally, like how you can present that in a book. So it was nice watching this video and being like, okay, like we were on the right track in our initial conversations.
Yeah, totally. And to give everyone context, this book project that we're working on isn't just going to be your typical photo book. We want to make specifically this book to be an artist book. And an artist book meaning it's a book made by an artist. And that artist will be me as a photographer, and then Isabel and I as in collaboration working on like the conceptual design, and Isabel designing it. And hopefully I can do some kind of handmade element to it. And by doing an artist book, it kind of gives us the freedom for this book to be whatever we want it to be. I don't want it to be like categorized or designed. I don't want it to be in a specific part of a library and like, you know, some like regional studies or whatever. Like I just want it to be a book by an artist that features artists, and people can use it for whatever they need to use it for, and reference it and contextualize it in the way that they need it for. But I kind of want the book to be about the art and the art making and the artist. So the book will include maybe a few words from me about the project as a whole. And I'm hoping to get an essayist to write on the series, maybe like develop some ideas and understanding, maybe, I don't know. It's our book, we can do what we want. And it's also going to be self-published. So that gives us even more creativity in terms of the content. We're going to have the photos, obviously, interview excerpts, and some kind of index of the photographs. And I want to do like a robust list of the visits and like kind of document as much as I can. And this will be printed in a pretty small edition, pretty like, I'm thinking 150. So
yeah, and there's just one other, when you're talking about artist books versus like just a photo book, I think one difference we're trying to strive for is that what makes an artist book is that it's not just a vehicle for displaying, portraying, publicizing artwork. It's an art form in and of itself. Yeah, just wanted to like add that.
Yeah, and in that vein, we've been kind of thinking about the structure of the book. So pushing the boundaries of like what, not pushing the boundaries, but just testing what we can do to kind of like supplement this book's overall like creative focus. So we have this idea for how we want to construct the book. And Isabel, do you want to maybe share a few words, and I'll jump in if needed?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's in its very early stage, so I don't want to, you know, this isn't on the record. Like, we're not wed specifically to this structure because it should be an evolving thing. But what we had this big brainstorming session. We went around to all these different artist bookstores in New York, and we were like, oh, we like that, don't like that. And we had this idea to push all of the content into one signature. So it would, most books are bound in multiple signatures, but this would be bound in one signature. And so through the binding, quite literally like forcing these into conversation with each other. And by binding in one signature, it like we would do a loose binding, so it wouldn't be sewn. And by doing that, you can like rearrange the order of the pages. And so perhaps for each book, because it is a small round, we do have control. The order of which of the artists changes, so the narrative changes, the way you like understand the conversation changes. That's what we were thinking about originally, like in terms of, you know, typeface design, graphic design, that still has to be sorted out. But basically finding a structural solution that in some way informs, reflects, refracts, and complicates the content is what, like, I think we're both interested in.
Yeah, that's a really good way to summarize it. Because again, like I want this to be like kind of like I want it to be defined by however the reader is defining it, and however the reader interprets it. And
like, I think a mark of if we have succeeded in the end is that if you take the book and you just substitute all the text and flow in text about like lemons or something, some random subject, and if the book no longer works because the content has changed, then that's like a sign that I think we've done a good job, because it's like it's so specific to what you're photographing and these subjects. Yeah, you can't just apply it to lemons.
that we'll have to remember that for so yeah, I still have a couple more people to photograph, but this is kind of like the gist of the project. And I'm kind of curious to hear if, you know, the audience has like feedback or any like input, ideas, questions, and feel free to unmute yourselves. If not, that's okay.
I have a question, Jenna and Isabel. I love the audio, and I'm curious if there's any thoughts of what will happen to that.
Good question. I actually was thinking, and Isabel, I didn't talk to you about this yet, but I want to make, you know, I've been wanting to make a special edition of all the books that we're gonna work on, and I was thinking maybe there can be like an edition, the first edition of, or the first 20 of the entire edition can maybe include like a USB of all of the with the artist's consent, of course, but like photos that I've taken and the interview footage, just so like, you know, the archive can kind of like disperse. And that's kind of one idea. I'm thinking about a website, maybe having like all of the some of the interviews living there, because I think that it brought the series to life in a way that I didn't expect. Like I was just recording on my iPhone, you know, and I wasn't thinking about using this at all, just to transcribe and to put in the book. But as I was transcribing them, I'm like, oh, this is really interesting to hear the sirens in the background, to hear like my and like just different elements that kind of contextualize the moment the photograph was taken. So I don't want to lose that, and I want to figure out a way to incorporate that. Isabel, do you have any ideas? Or
well, immediately I thought of, people might know of this book. It's called I Can Make You Feel Good by Tyler Mitchell. And there was a special edition, and in it there was like a USB, and it came, when you plug that in, there's like a playlist that Tyler Mitchell had listened to when he was creating the book, and like all of his in situ contextual elements. So something like that, yeah, could totally work. But it would be very interesting. I'll have to like think about this, about how to pick up on those ambient sounds, because they were so nice and they were so textural. And yeah, recreating that in some sort of graphic way.
Totally. Does anyone else have questions or comments to share?
Hi, Jenna.
Hi, Mom.
So, how many more artists are you gonna be interviewing? Are you gonna expand your search? Are you gonna stick to the New York City area? Like, what are your plans going forward?
So I am, so for this book, I need to interview 3 or 4 more people. And after, I give Isabel all of the files and we start creating the book, I think I want to continue doing this series because it's something I do anyway. Like I love hanging out with artists and I love carrying my camera everywhere. And I love audio recording. I have hundreds of audio clips in my phone. So I feel like it's something that like I do anyway, but maybe now I can do it more intentionally and like the project can kind of manifest in its own way. Any future projects can manifest. So I definitely want to continue doing this for as long as I can and as long as I'm friends with very cool people. And like I also want to like keep going back to these 10 artists studios and like keep talking to them and go deeper. I feel like the interviews that we had were kind of just scratching the surface. And maybe me and Isabel can make more books. Yeah.
Hi, Jenna. First of all, that was amazing. I love the photos and I love the interviews. Secondly, when can we expect to see the book out? Like, when are you planning on publishing it? When can I buy it and get it autographed by you?
So what did we say? I'm finishing up the rounds of interviews in January, and then hopefully we'll have all the content late January, February. So I would say spring.
Yeah, pending any supply chain fuckery, hopefully by spring.
Yeah, so because it's a self-published project, I can kind of work on my own timeline, and me and Isabel are working collaboratively on this. So we want to do what makes most sense for us and our capacity. I will say that this thus far, Queens Arts Council supported the project. So I got funds to buy the hundreds of dollars of scanning and of film rolls. I even bought a photo printer. I paid for my fare between going to like Katonah and Yonkers. So like thus far it was funded through Queens Arts Council. And then I'm hoping next year to get a grant to cover the production costs. If I don't get a grant, I'm hoping pre-sales will cover. So it all depends on a number of different factors, but we're aiming for spring. And also next year we'll be officially launching Side Projects Press, which will be the press with me and Isabel, and we'll be launching 2 books, this book and another book as well. So watch out.
It would be cool to have this become like a yearly publication that you do where like every year you interview like a new roster of artists and just, like down the line after 5 or 10 years or however long, you can just compile them into like one big anthology.
I love that. Isabel, what do you think of doing this every year?
I mean, why not? I'm down.
Totally. And we had this conversation the other day. We were like, this is all for fun. Like, this is what we love doing. So for sure, it's really fun. I'm excited.
Jenna, I had a quick
suggestion. First of all, I love this so much. Thank you. This was beautiful. And like others have already said, the audio, the quality of the audio really added a lot of layers. Just hearing each artist's voice, being able to put a voice to the face and to the process, and just the quality of each person's voice, it was really intimate. And I was just thinking, if the USB idea is hard, maybe like including like a QR code in each of the books that leads to like a SoundCloud playlist that like somebody, as they go through the book, can listen along to the, you know, to each interview. I think that would add such a layer to the experience of going through the book and just hearing each artist in their own words, in their voice, or leading it to a website or whatever. But if you include the QR code just in the book, then that experience is like exclusive to the people who own the book. So yeah, just a suggestion.
I love that idea. Isabel, what do you think of that?
Yeah, that'd be really cool. And like, if, you know, each edition is a slightly different pagination, like the order changes, like the QR code could be specific to that order. That could be really cool. Yeah, thank you for that idea.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. I actually really love that. And I love that it can be accessible to anyone holding the book. So I'll consider that. Maybe one more question if anyone else wants to say anything over the mic.
I had a question for you, Jenna. Was there anything that really surprised you or anything unexpected that came up along the way?
Yeah, definitely. First off, just putting together this presentation. A week ago, this wasn't something I was thinking of, having it be like a multimedia project. I put this together over the weekend after listening to hours and hours of interview footage. And I was even like splicing up the interviews to try to like capture these big ideas. And I'm like, wait, like I can take 2 minutes and have it speak to like an entire experience. So I think the audio element was a surprise. And it's exciting because I can experiment with this now, and it kind of brings like a different perspective to the project and a different layer. There's that. And then when I was putting the presentation together, just like as Isabel mentioned earlier, the thematic ties between each artist. I mean, I didn't do that on purpose. I didn't curate the footage so that this one talks about it, where Lara ends with the word collapse, and then Orlee starts talking about how she works within collapse. Like that wasn't really planned. That kind of just happened. And it kind of shows like this larger conversation that we're all within. And it makes sense of this moment. That was definitely an element of surprise, but you know, a welcomed one. Good question. Okay, well, with that, just want to thank everyone again for joining. You know, the project will continue, and in hopefully a couple of months, the book will come to life and you all can experience it in a whole new way. So yeah, thank you, Isabel. Thank you to all the friends, family, comrades. Thanks to the participating artists. Thanks to funders at Queens Arts Council. Yeah. Bye, everyone.